Every wild animal on Earth is taught the same lesson before it can even walk. Stay away from humans. Because we are the deadliest thing this planet has ever produced. We hunt them, we trap them, we burn down their forests, we turn their oceans into hunting grounds with GPS and sonar. And yet, every single year, something happens that makes zero evolutionary sense. Wild animals swim toward us. They approach us. They seem to ask, somehow, for help. December 2005, off the coast of California, a diver named James Moskito gets a call. A humpback whale, tangled in crab line, barely moving. When his team reaches her, she's wrapped in over 20 lines, hundreds of pounds of gear cutting into her skin. She's been dragged almost completely underwater, unable to surface, unable to breathe properly. One flipper is bound so tight it's slicing into the flesh. For nearly an hour, divers work beneath her with curved knives, cutting line after line. A creature the size of a school bus. One tail flick could kill every single person in that water. She doesn't move. When the last rope falls away, she doesn't bolt for open ocean. She circles back. She nudges each diver one at a time, gently, like she's saying thank you in the only language she has. Then she disappears into the blue. This isn't a one-time miracle. Off Hawaii, divers report the same pattern with manta rays. Some show up with hooks buried in their gills, line wrapped around their wings. Instead of fleeing, they slow down. They hover. They flip onto their backs, presenting the wound, holding still in a way they never hold still for anything else. Dolphins do it too. Off Florida, a wild dolphin swims straight up to a group of snorkelers, stops, stays completely still at the surface, until someone notices the fishing line strangling its fin. They cut it loose, it swims free. And it's not just the ocean. In Kenya, in Zimbabwe, wildlife rangers have documented elephants with snare wounds walking toward trucks, slowing their pace, standing a few feet from a vehicle, a level of trust they show toward almost nothing else on four wheels. Some of these elephants were treated as calves years earlier by rangers in trucks just like this one. When they came back injured as full-grown adults, they came back to the same shape of machine. Then there's the strangest version of all. New Zealand, 2010. A fisherman is out on open water. A pod of orcas circling nearby. Suddenly, a fur seal pup leaps straight into his boat. Not toward the shore, not toward safety in any normal sense, straight for the one thing the orcas physically cannot reach. Researchers have logged this again and again. Seals and sea lions using boats, docks, even surfers as floating safe zones in the middle of an active hunt. They're not asking humans to fight the predator. They're using us as terrain. So what is actually happening here? Are these animals making a calculated decision? Is a wild whale somehow understanding that the most dangerous species on Earth is, in this one moment, safer than the alternative? For decades, most scientists wouldn't even touch that idea. The real explanation is colder, simpler, and honestly, more interesting. It's called associative learning. An animal doesn't need to understand intention. It just needs a pattern. A whale trapped in line for hours, slowly suffocating, eventually hits a point where fear stops mattering. Drowning is worse than the unknown. At that point, anything that might relieve the pressure is worth the risk. Human, boat, doesn't matter. The seal jumping into that boat isn't reasoning about kindness. It's running a much older calculation. Anything is better than an orca. But there's a deeper layer underneath this. Whales, dolphins, seals. They didn't evolve around large land predators the way elephants or deer did. Their entire threat system is wired differently. A boat, a diver, a human silhouette in the water. None of it triggers the same instant panic that a human triggers in, say, an injured deer on land. Some researchers believe this gap is exactly why marine animals show this behavior more often than land animals do. Then there's brain size, social complexity. Humpback whales, dolphins, elephants, 3 of the only species on Earth confirmed to recognize individuals across years, form long-term bonds outside their own family, pass the mirror self-recognition test. Some researchers argue this kind of intelligence lets certain species generalize trust. One safe encounter, stored somewhere deep in memory, gets applied to a completely different human years later in a completely different crisis. That would explain the Kenyan elephants. A calf helped once by a ranger might not remember that one specific person, but it might carry forward a category. Vehicles like that one didn't hurt me. Not full understanding, pattern recognition, running on an unusually powerful brain. But here's where real scientists get careful. Here's where the story gets a lot less magical. Because most of what looks like an animal asking for help might actually be something happening in our own heads. Humans are exceptional at reading intention into behavior, even when there's none there at all. A manta ray slowing near a diver might just be reacting to bubbles, not begging. A whale circling back to nudge a diver might just be doing what whales do after any disturbance in the water. Researchers are blunt about this. Confirmed cases of an animal deliberately seeking out a specific human for help are rare. Most of what goes viral online as a heartwarming rescue has a story layered on top of footage that's genuinely ambiguous. The whale in California may never have understood that divers were the solution. It's entirely possible she simply associated stillness near large moving objects with relief, and stayed still near the first large moving objects she found. And here's the darker statistic hiding underneath all of it. For every documented case of an animal approaching a human for help, there are thousands that died silently from the exact same entanglement, the exact same snare wound, the exact same predator chase. They never came near a person at all. These stories aren't normal behavior, they're outliers. Rare moments where fear, exhaustion, desperation, and unusually high intelligence all collide at the same second. Which, honestly, makes this more interesting, not less. Because the animals that do this share something very specific. Long lifespans, complex memory, deep social bonds. The ability to recognize individuals across years. These traits aren't scattered randomly across the animal kingdom. They cluster almost exclusively in the species we already suspect have the richest inner lives on the planet. Elephants, whales, dolphins, even seals in their own way. The same animals that grieve their dead. The same animals that comfort injured members of their group. The same animals that recognize themselves in a mirror. Maybe that's the real pattern. Not that wild animals understand humans are uniquely capable of saving them, but that the same cognitive machinery that lets an elephant mourn a dead calf, or a dolphin protect an injured podmate, occasionally, rarely, generalizes outward. Toward a species it has every evolutionary reason to fear. It's worth sitting with how rare trust actually is in nature. It isn't the default setting for any wild animal. It has to be earned across millions of years of close calls. And it can be destroyed in a single instant by one bad outcome. So when trust does appear, even briefly, even by accident, it tends to show up in the species that can afford to be flexible. The ones with enough cognitive overhead to occasionally override an instinct that has kept their entire bloodline alive for millions of years. We don't know what a whale is truly thinking underneath 100 feet of crabline. We don't know if a manta ray flipping onto its back is a decision or just instinct refined over millions of years of survival. What we do know is this. Somewhere in the ocean, somewhere in the African brush, animals with absolutely no reason to trust us occasionally do anyway, for reasons we are still only part way to understanding. And maybe that says less about how smart they are and more about what kind of mind is even capable of trust in the first place. Because trusting something dangerous, even once, even for a few seconds, isn't a small thing. It might be one of the rarest decisions in all of nature. And every time it happens between a creature that could easily kill us, and one that, for just a few minutes, chose not to be afraid.